Hello, class. My apologies for changing things up on you at the last minute. Certainly, it was not my intent to cancel class. I had an unforeseen thing to occur today that I had to attend to, but I did not want for you to fall behind in the coverage of the material. And so I thought the best next thing to be in there was to record a video of the lecture that I would have given today so that you can view during the class period, hopefully. So I want to continue on the conversation we started in class, but before I do that, I do want and hope that everyone have access to the reading materials, to the ebook. I know that there were some people that were struggling to find how to access the ebook. I was able to talk to the publisher, and so to get information on how I may assist you. So if you're still having problems accessing the book, please reach out to me or reach out to one of your classmates for assistance. And please do that sooner than later, because I want you to keep up with the readings and as well as the quizzes and assignments that are attached to those readings. And so there are points associated with that. And so you want to make sure that you're on top of it. So please reach out if you are still having issues with that. Okay, I am not quite completely sure where we left off at on Thursday, but I have an idea. So if I am off a bit, please let me know. But I want to start out today talking about theory and talking specifically about functionalist theory, which is one of the sociological major perspectives that we're going to cover throughout the course as we move through various topics within the textbook. So, theory. Recall earlier in the semester, last week, we talked about theory as having two components. We say that theory can have explanatory power, and that good theory is able to explain social phenomena. And we said that good theory also have predictive power. Good theory should be able to predict the direction of or association of two relatively isolated items. We know, for example, age and political activity. I mean, good theory should be able to predict that as one ages increase, so does their level of political engagement. And so it should be able to predict and it should be able to explain. With that said, when we talk about theory, theory is simply a statement of how and why specific facts are related. We can talk about predictive theory explaining age and political activity, but a good theory should also be able to explain why those two things are related. And that's certainly one essential function of theory, to explain why two things are related. And so when we talk about a theoretical approach, a sociological theory, what we're in essence talking about is a set of premises, of statements that attempts to explain and guide the working of society. Sociologists often use these theoretical approaches to guide their thinking and how they view the society. And sometimes they use theory to guide their research. Again, sociologists may want to predict certain phenomenons. They might want to explain certain phenomenons, and theory is a good guidepost to help steer one's thinking through that research process. So a theoretical approach is critical to any sociological endeavor. And as we stated last week, there are several theories that guide sociological thinking. And my goal, as I stated, is to offer you a multiple set of perspectives to think about the world. And the functionalist theory, or the structural functionalist theory, is just one of those approaches. And so we want to keep in mind that it's one of many. We got structural functionalism. You can also talk about conflict theory. There's also symbolic interaction theory, rational choice theory. And so structural functionalism is just one of many ways of looking and thinking about the world. So what is structural functionalism? This is a framework that asserts that society is largely a complex system of many parts that work together to promote stability and solidarity. The functions theory then is a macro level theory. It's a macro level theory because it focuses largely on the impact of those larger social structures on the individual, on the community, um, on other entities. And so we can explain things by looking at the way in which those larger social structures or institutions or entities impact on those smaller things. And so a structural functionalist is concerned with culture. A structural functionalist is concerned with social institutions and large organizations and how those things sort of shape our social world. And so this sort of notion that society is a system, is a system of moving and interrelated parts that work in concert to maintain the whole. Structural functionalists start with the premise that human nature is largely corrupt, that we are selfish, self-interested, hedonistic, and if we are left to our own devices, there will probably be this sort of war against all. The structural functionalists then ask the question, given human nature, how do we explain stability? And one answer to that question is structure. We need structure to guide us against our human instinct. And so the structural functionalist point of view point out that we need to look at society in a way that enables us to investigate the various functions that make up that society. The argument is that every institution, every organization, every aspect of culture, be it language, our routines, our norms, our values, all those things have a function, they have a purpose. And that purpose is to maintain a stable society. So at the core of the functions theory is this idea, this notion of social structure. Social structure are those relatively stable patterns of social behavior. But what do we mean by that? When we talk about relatively stable patterns of social behavior, we mean just that. If we think about our day-to-day realities, we see that those are comprised of a lot of sort of patterns of behavior that we come to expect as a given. One example we can think about our movement in our vehicles through traffic. We are able to get about largely because of our patterns, our relatively stable patterns. We can enter an intersection knowing that the traffic that's coming in the other direction is going to adhere to the laws or the rules of the road. And so long as everyone adhere to the rules of the roads, we can have an orderly flow of traffic without anyone getting injured, without accidents and so forth. And so in a similar regard, there are other patterns of behavior. When we sort of approach one another in a public setting, we are often cordial to one another. We speak, we say hello, we ask everyone, others, how's your day? Those things are stable patterns of relationships that we can predict with a certain level of certainty how people are going to behave in social settings, because the patterns of behavior, it's stable, it's structured, it's consistent, and predictable. And given that predictability, We know, or we can base our other actions based upon the predictability of other people's behavior. And so those behaviors then become a part of the social structure. They are the foundations by which we build social life, our language, our values, our norms, our habits. All those things are predicated on the predictability of our social interactions. And so the social structure is critical because the functionalists maintain that it is there where society sort of lives. And we recognize that each one of those relationships, each one of those interactions, each one of the relationships and interactions that make for institutions, organizations, systems, each one of those have a function, have a purpose to maintain the society as a whole. And so the task of the structural functionalist is to identify the function, the purpose of each and every one of the social interactions, exchanges, relationships, institutions, organizations, ideas, and how they relate to the stability of the entire society. We can think of it as the human body. We know that the human body is made up of many parts. We have our arms, our legs, our feet, our eyes, our mouth, our brain, our toes. All those things work together. And when we talk about a healthy body, what a healthy body looks like, what a functioning body looks like, a functioning body, a fully functioning body is one where all the limbs, the fluids, everything is working, and it's working in concert with one another to create that equilibrium of the body, where the body is healthy, functioning, and so forth. And so similarly, we think about the society in the same way. So structural functionalism is about a consensus, a cooperative interaction of social life. We look at the way in which our institutions, our culture cooperate to maintain the whole. And so our society then is made up of this system that contributes to the overall operation of that society. We can identify then several key figures that are critical to functionalist thought. The first is Talcott Parson. The second is Augusta Comte. The third, Emily Durkheim, Herbert Spencer. He was the individual that coined, or at least framed, that analogy of society and the human body. And then there's Robert Merton. I went through those rather quickly because I just want to expose you to those names, to familiarize yourself with them. We will have lots of time throughout the semester to get familiar in a more in-depth way with their ideas, with their contributions, with their theoretical perspectives. But for now, it's important just to associate those theorists with functionalist thought. And so we will definitely come back to those individuals. But for now, I want to focus your attention on Robert Merton. I separate him because of his contributions that are relevant to our overall understanding of functionalist theory. Merton was a theorist who identified and addressed some of the challenges, limitations, and flaws of functionalist theory. Merton sort of was one of the first to recognize that while we can accept the idea that society is made up of many parts, and those parts all have a function, a purpose to maintain the whole, Merton sort of highlighted the reality that some of those functions are more important than other functions, or some of those parts are more important than other parts. Some of those parts have obvious, stated and intended functions or purposes. Some of them have not so obvious intended functions. And so Merton introduced several terms: manifest functions, those openly stated conscious functions, as well as latent functions. Latent functions were those unintended functions. And so we can think about this in a way by way of thinking about our colleges and universities, perhaps the easiest institution to think about to explain what Merton meant by manifest and latent functions. So a manifest function of a college and university is the openly stated function. We can think about that in the most obvious way. We talk about, if we look at the brochure of a college or university, we look at on the website, it's going to say something to the effect that the purpose or mission of the college or the university is to provide a liberal arts education, to provide um, training for individuals to go into the workplace. It's a place that supports, nurtures research and science, technology. Those are sort of the obviously openly stated functions of a college or university. But we also know that alongside those manifest functions, there are also a huge set of unconscious unintended functions that are just as valuable to the college, to the university in their function. And so, in addition to getting a liberal arts education, in addition to learning a skill or trade, you're also going to meet some friends. You're going to develop networks. You're going to even perhaps, meet your spouse in college. And so we recognize that colleges and universities are places where like-minded individuals are there, um, having pursuing similar goals with similar interests. And so it is there where you're going to develop friendships, you're going to develop networks, you're going to develop, you're going to meet your spouse, or you're going to perhaps meet the individual that you may go into business with later. These are grounds where a lot of things happen on a college campus other than the obviously stated intended goal of the college or university. And the latent functions is intended to address just that we can talk about functions in a variety of ways, those manifest intended functions and those unintended functions that are just as important as those manifest functions. Merton also pointed out that not all um, functions are positive in that they do not always contribute to social stability, that we can recognize that functions can also, or entities can also be dysfunctional, that not everything in society, not all of its parts actually work towards stability and order. And so we can talk about crime, for example. Certainly crime from a functionalist perspective um, can say that it has a purpose. I mean, functionalism would certainly assert that crime is important to the society for no other reason other than it creates a lot of jobs. It creates institutions, the need for various institutions. And so without crime, we would not need any police officers. We would not need judges, at least not as many. We will not need bailiffs and all the other sort of support staff that goes to support law enforcement. We wouldn't need those things. And that would be potentially a tremendous blow to the economy to remove all those jobs from the economy. And so in that sense, we can say that crime serves the function, the purpose of creating a sector of employment that otherwise would not be there if there were not an issue of crime. But there's no denying the reality or the fact that crime is also dysfunctional, that it disrupts the social system. It often leads to instability. And so, for those reasons, Merton pointed out that we can identify functions, but we can also identify dysfunctions. And so, I want to stop there. I have a video that I think captures in a real nice package the basic elements and tenets of functionalist theory. And so I'm going to pause here to show that video, and then we'll come back on the side with the assignment for the day.
Functionalism is a system of thinking based on the ideas of Emile Durkheim that looks at society from a large scale perspective. It examines the necessary structures that make up a society and how each part helps to keep the society stable. According to functionalism, society is heading toward an equilibrium. I know it sounds a bit strange that a society can be at equilibrium, but consider the changes many businesses have had to make in response to companies like Amazon. Local businesses must adapt to find a new way to cater to customers in order to restore the balance. In the theory of functionalism, society is made from a bunch of connected structures. One structure is institutions, which are structures that meet the needs of the society, like education systems, financial institutions, businesses, marriage, laws, mass media, non governmental organizations, medicine, religion, the military, police forces, and lots of others too. Another structure is what Durkheim called social facts. Social facts are ways of thinking and acting formed by the society that existed before any one individual and will still exist after any individual is dead. They are unique objects that cannot be influenced by an individual. They have a coercive effect over the individual that is usually only noticed when we resist against them. So, for example, one social fact is the law. It is always there, but we don't notice it until we try and break it or act against it. Some other examples are moral regulations, religious faiths, and social currents like suicide or birth rate. You might wonder how suicide can be a social fact. Well, one person committing suicide has no effect on the presence of suicide in the society. Social facts are a facet of the society itself, and, according to Durkheim, are a necessary structure. But society is more than just the sum of its parts. It is dependent on the structures that create it, just like a cell is dependent on all the little parts that make it up. Every part of the cell has a specific vital function that depends on other parts of the cell. Without everything working together smoothly, the cell would die. The same is true of a society. Every structure has a function that meets a need of the society, and all the structures work together to maintain a social equilibrium. So, for example, you have schools, which educate students so they can find good jobs and support the community. And businesses provide specialized services, and laws maintain social order. These recognized and intended consequences of institutions are known as manifest functions. But sometimes the institutions have unintended consequences. Schools allow the students and professors to make social connections, and they expose the students to new activities through extracurriculars. Businesses connect people across societies. These unrecognized and unintended consequences are called latent functions and are often indirect effects of the institution. Now, Durkheim's main question was, what holds a society together? How can it remain relatively stable even as traditions disappear and customs change? He thought that small societies were held together by their similarities, and the individual was self-sufficient, but that only works for small societies, and we all know societies change and grow large. The small society would eventually evolve into a large society where the individual was interdependent on others. But what causes this evolution of society to occur? The most basic factor is population growth within a limited space. Suddenly, there isn't enough land for everyone to own their own farm and feed themselves. So, just a few farmers grow enough food for the entire community. But now, the farmers don't have enough time for other necessities like making clothes or teaching their kids. The people who no longer have to grow food now take on different roles like tailoring or education, and everyone becomes dependent on one another for their continued well being. People have become specialized, which forces mutual interdependence. This interdependence helps to ensure that the community won't fall apart. Now that people depend on each other for the production of goods and services, there is a need for a method of distribution and a way to control and coordinate that production and distribution. In functionalism, a change to either production, distribution, or coordination will force the others to adapt in order to maintain a stable state society. Social change is annoying and upsets the equilibrium and threatens the mutual interdependence of the people within that society. The institutions and structures of the society adapt only just enough to compensate for a change and maintain the stability of mutual interdependence. Phew, alright, that just about covers it. While functionalism is a nice way to look at society with its equilibrium of institutions all filling the needs of the society they create, there are some serious problems here. Functionalism focuses completely on the institution, with little regard for the importance of the individual. The individual is acknowledged, but nothing they do really affects the structures of society. Functionalism is also largely unable to explain social change and conflict. We know it happens, but functionalism is so focused on maintaining the equilibrium of the society that little significant change is modeled and no conflict can occur. The structures of a society adapt only just enough to find the stability again. Right, so while there's more to understanding a society than just looking at the stable state of its parts, functionalism is helpful in understanding the workings of society by examining the functions of its integral structures.
Okay, I think that that gives us a good sort of starting point to begin to apply and develop that sort of working understanding of structural functionalism. And so, what I want to do now, I want to take a step back, give you an opportunity to digest structural functionalism, to think about it and apply it. And so, uh, I have an assignment for you. I would like you to channel your C. Wright Mill uh, energy and of the sociological imagination and identify a social problem of your choosing. It can be anything, any problem that you identify, and I would like you to explain that social problem from the perspective of structural functionalism. And so I would like you to apply the theory to some social problem. And also, I would like you to identify the limitations of that explanation. What are the shortcomings of that explanation, of the functionalist explanation, as it applies to the social problem that you are seeking to explain? And so this does not have to be elaborate. I just want a sort of a 1 to 2 page paper, uh, type double space, where you sort of engage this question of functionalism. Again, my intent here is just want to see how you are thinking and using and applying the theory. This is a theory that we're going to come back to over and over. And so it's critical that we have a good understanding, at least a working understanding of it. It is not so important that you agree with it, with the theory. But if you disagree with it, I would like to know what are your points of contention with the theory. And if you think that it's a good theory, I'd like to hear that as well. But the intent is to get at to help me understand that you understand the theory. So we'll have that due next week on Tuesday. I will set up an assignment in Blackboard for you to submit it. And if you have any questions or concerns or thoughts about the assignment or the video, please feel free to reach out. I'm going to make myself available for the entirety of the class hour and beyond. You have my phone numbers on the syllabus, or you can email me if you have any questions. So I thank you for your time. And again, I apologize for the short notice of the change of plans. But I hope that this allowed us to move forward and not lose a day. So enjoy the rest of your day. And I will look forward to seeing each of you on Tuesday of next week.